Welcome to Napkin Theology. Today, let's talk about the Christian story. Now, every great story has three basic parts. Every great story has a setting. Every great story has a conflict. And every great story has a resolution. Now, the setting essentially tells us where the story takes place, when it takes place, and who it is about. The conflict then is where a problem enters into the story, and the resolution is where that conflict is overcome. So the setting for the Christian story we found in Genesis chapters 1 and 2. There we have a good God who makes a good creation, and He calls it very good. However, the conflict comes along quite quickly, because in the next chapter, in Genesis 3, we have what is called the fall of humanity. Now, essentially, the fall of humanity occurs because humanity decides that it wants to know for itself what is beneficial and what is harmful, rather than trusting in the Creator. Now, the resolution for the Christian story actually occurs in two different parts. The first part of that story is found in the cross of Christ. Paul explains in 2 Corinthians 5:21 that God made Him who has no sin to be sin for us, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. In other words, there's something about the death and resurrection of Christ that's able to change humanity, to take us from death into life. But that's not the end of the story. We all know on this side of the resurrection, there's still pain and suffering in the world. And so, how do we achieve a final resolution? Well, the Bible looks forward to this when it discusses a final resurrection for humanity. Paul explains in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 that the resurrection of Christ is terribly important, so important in fact that Christ is a prototype of what God has planned for believers. Christ is the first fruits of the resurrection. And so it is with the final resurrection of believers then that the story will be brought to its conclusion, and a glorious one at that. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Napkin Theology, where we help you better understand and communicate your faith using simply a napkin and a pen. And be sure to check out Napkin Theology's home at napkinvideo.com.